The council chamber of the Galactic Concord was unlike anything humanity had ever built. A colossal ring of silver and crystal floated above the gas giant Velcor. Its light refracted through vast windows that showed storms the size of continents swirling far below. Inside, more than 1,000 alien delegates had gathered, nobles, generals and rulers from every known species in the galaxy. They sat in floating seats arranged like petals around a central podium. Their eyes, or whatever they used for eyes, focused on the figure now rising from the center dais. He was enormous, easily 4 meters tall, his chitin armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. His 4 eyes glowed gold, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of rule. He was Supreme Chancellor Vrax of the Zorath Empire, the ruler of the oldest, richest, and most feared civilization in known space. When he spoke, even the walls seemed to hum with his words. "By decree of the Zorath High Council," he said, his voice low and cold, "we hereby declare war on the species known as humanity." The words hung in the air. Heavy and final. For a moment, the entire chamber went still. Then the whispers began. Thousands of alien voices, layered like a storm, rose into anxious murmurs. Some sounded gleeful, others terrified. Many simply refused to believe what they'd just heard. The holoscreens around the chamber flickered, projecting the Zorath banner, a crimson spiral over black, as messages raced across the galactic networks. War declared, humanity condemned, Terran peace accords void. Across the galaxy, on distant worlds, citizens stopped what they were doing to watch. Some cheered. Others prayed. Because when the Zorath Empire declared war, civilizations ended. It had happened before, a dozen times across the last 1,000 years. Empires had risen, resisted, and been erased. Worlds burned, names forgotten. No one defied the Zorath and survived, and yet, somewhere in that enormous chamber, a soft sound broke the silence. Click, the sound of a lighter. At the far end of the council ring, in the human delegations section, a lone figure sat. He hadn't moved once during the entire declaration. While others trembled, whispered, or shouted, he simply sat. Legs crossed, posture relaxed, eyes half closed. A faint wisp of smoke curled up beside him. The aliens stared, confused. Some hissed in disgust. Others leaned forward in fascination. The man looked young, perhaps in his early 30s by human standards, with a scar along his jaw and dark hair that looked slightly unkempt. His uniform was black with silver edges, clean but simple, marked only by a single insignia on his chest, Terran Union Diplomatic Corps. In his right hand, between 2 fingers, was a thin white stick, a relic from old Earth, a cigarette. The sight of it unsettled the council. No one smoked here. Air was purified, controlled, perfect. Yet he sat there, calmly inhaling smoke as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "Envoy Ward," he said slowly, "do you have anything to say on behalf of your species?" The man lifted his gaze lazily, meeting the alien's glare with steady gray eyes. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then he smiled, not politely, not nervously, but in a way that made every creature in the room uneasy. It was a human smile, the kind that suggested he knew something they didn't. He took another slow drag of his cigarette, the ember glowing bright red against the cold blue light of the chamber. The smoke curled upward, twisting through the air like a ghost. Around him the murmurs started again. "Arrogant primate. Does he not understand?" "They're finished." "He's finished." But the man didn't seem to hear them. Or maybe he did, and simply didn't care. He exhaled, a long, slow breath of smoke that drifted toward the center of the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "You really shouldn't have done that." The words were quiet, but they carried through the chamber like a thunderclap. The murmurs stopped instantly. Even the Chancellor froze. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. No fear, no outrage, just quiet certainty, as if the declaration of war wasn't a threat, but a mistake. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Few dared, but the human didn't flinch." He leaned back in his chair, letting the smoke rise between them. "Dare," he said softly. "No, Chancellor." "I'm just warning you." Vrax's eyes blazed. "Your warning means nothing. The Zorath Empire stands supreme. Humanity will be crushed before your kind even understands what happened. The man tilted his head, the faintest smirk still on his lips. "Maybe," he said. "But history has a strange sense of humor. For a heartbeat." They just stared at each other, the most powerful being in the galaxy and the lone human envoy who refused to kneel. Then, without another word, the human stubbed out his cigarette on the arm of his chair, stood, and began to walk toward the exit. Every gaze followed him. Every whisper died. The sound of his boots on the polished floor echoed through the hall like distant gunfire. As he reached the door, he paused. Without turning around, he said one last thing. "When the sky burns red, remember this moment," and then he was gone. The massive chamber fell into an uneasy silence. The Chancellor tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Something in that human's tone had chilled even him, something deep, instinctive. Because for the first time in centuries, the Zorath ruler had seen not weakness, but warning. Across the galaxy, sensors flashed as Terran communication buoys went dark one by one. Human ships vanished from known coordinates. Trade routes shut down, and then silence. To most it looked like fear, retreat. But a few older civilizations remembered an ancient saying from the humans themselves. Before the storm, there is always calm. In the endless void of space, far beyond the Council's reach, a massive Terran fleet stirred from sleep. Engines ignited. Weapons came online. The stars themselves seemed to flicker, as if holding their breath. Back in the chamber, the smoke from the Envoy's cigarette still lingered in the air. Thin, ghostly, a final trace of humanity. And in that faint, fading smoke, every alien who had laughed, whispered, or gloated, suddenly felt the same cold thought crawl through their mind. What have we just done? In the days that followed the declaration of war, the galaxy held its breath. The Zorath Empire's message had spread across every communication channel. From the shimmering cities of the core worlds to the frozen mining colonies beyond the rim. War with humanity. The words alone sent ripples of disbelief through the stars. To most it sounded absurd. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, a species barely 3 centuries into faster-than-light travel. They had no ancient fleets, no homeworld-spanning empires, no divine rulers. They were, at least in theory, fragile, and yet no one laughed. Not really, because beneath the chatter, beneath the propaganda and bravado, there was something else. Something ancient, something close to fear. For years, the galaxy had whispered about the humans. They were the unpredictable ones, the species that didn't quite fit into the civilized order of things. When other races talked of peace, humans talked of survival. When others sought comfort, humans sought challenge. They built colonies on worlds other species had declared uninhabitable, planets with freezing nights, acid rains, storms that could strip metal. And they thrived there. The archives of the Galactic Concord told stories, rumors mostly, about the first human settlers. The Tark Coalition had offered them a planet long ago, a test world to prove themselves worthy of membership. The world was called Corvex 3. It had 80% volcanic surface and air thick with sulfur. No other species could survive there longer than a few weeks. The humans called it home. A century later, Corvex 3's cities gleamed under dark skies, and its people mined resources that had once been thought impossible to reach. When the Tarks tried to reclaim the planet, thinking the humans would simply surrender it, they disappeared. No official records explained what happened. Only that the Tark Coalition signed a non-aggression pact soon after, one that still stood. To the Zorath, those tales had always sounded like myth. They saw the humans as reckless and naive, useful tools for trade, but hardly a military threat. Until now, when the war was declared, the Zorath expected defiance, maybe even negotiation. But instead, nothing, no fleets, no broadcasts, no angry speeches. Humanity went silent. Terran space was sealed within hours. Every relay, every trade route, every station shut down. Ships that entered human territory did not return. Some claimed it was cowardice. Others began to wonder if the silence was deliberate. A calm before something far worse. On the 3rd day, the Zorath military held a briefing. The Empire's admirals gathered in the towering war citadel of Cathal Prime, their holographic displays showing maps of the Terran border. At the center of the room, Admiral Zekar leaned forward. His mandibles clicked in frustration. "We've scanned their frontier worlds. They're so empty. The room stirred. Empty? Impossible. Their colonies number in the hundreds. Zekar shook his head. Every census sweep returns the same reading. Power signatures minimal. No life signs. No transmissions. It's as if they evacuated overnight. The Supreme Chancellor's projection loomed above them, massive and golden. Evacuated? To where? No one had an answer. Finally, an intelligence officer stepped forward, trembling slightly. Our deep space probes caught movement beyond the Perseus Rift, near the Orion Expanse. Unknown vessels, large ones. Formation tight. Silent drive signatures. The Chancellor. 3 weeks after the Zorath Empire's declaration of war, the Galactic Council reconvened. The chamber that had once been filled with pride and arrogance was now tense, buzzing with unease. The lights were dimmer this time, not out of design but out of caution. No one had heard a single official word from humanity since the Envoy had left. No broadcasts, no ambassadors, no explanations. Only silence, and silence in a galaxy so full of noise was terrifying. The Supreme Chancellor, Vrax, stood at the central podium again. He had expected to be celebrating victory by now. Instead, his fleets had vanished, whole armadas lost without a trace. First the 9th expansion fleet near Epsilon Trine, then the 3rd armada in the Lyra system. No wreckage, no distress calls, just gone. Now even his most loyal admirals avoided his gaze. Something was happening out there in the void, something beyond their understanding. And it all began after that human said 7 quiet words. You really shouldn't have done that. Summon the council to order, Vrax commanded, his voice more brittle than before. The chamber's lights flared as delegates took their seats. Reptilian, crystalline, aquatic, winged. Every species that still dared to appear. A hush fell as the Chancellor began. We face an enemy that hides in shadow, he said. Humanity has gone silent, yes. But their silence is not power, and it is desperation. They are cornered, disorganized. Their technology cannot match ours. Their ships cannot rival ours. They will fall as all lesser species have fallen. He paused, scanning the chamber. And we will... A voice interrupted him, calm, low, human. You always talk too much. The sound froze the entire room. Slowly, every delegate turned toward the far end of the table, where the human envoy's seat had been empty for weeks. It wasn't empty anymore. Elias Ward sat there again, relaxed as ever, a cigarette burning between his fingers. The faint smoke curled upward in the still air. No one had seen him arrive. No ship had docked. No guards had noticed. He was just there. The Chancellor's lower arms twitched in alarm. You dare return here? Ward didn't answer. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black cube, the same kind he had placed before. He set it gently on the table. The cube hummed, then projected a shimmering blue hologram above it. The projection was unmistakable, the symbol of Earth, a stylized blue sphere crossed by 12 stars. Then a face appeared, an older human woman, silver hair tied neatly behind her head, her eyes sharp and calm. This is Prime Counselor Naomi Reyes, speaking for the United Terran Union, the hologram said. To the Galactic Council and to the Zorath Empire, every voice went silent. We came to the stars seeking peace, she continued. We offered trade, knowledge, and alliance. We asked for nothing but respect. You answered with arrogance. You demanded tribute. You attacked our colonies. You declared war. Her expression didn't change, but her voice grew colder. You mistake our silence for weakness. It is not weakness. It is mercy. The last word echoed through the chamber like a blade. Vrax slammed a clawed hand against the table. Enough of this, but the hologram continued, ignoring him completely. Humanity did not come to start wars. But if you bring war to us, we will finish it. We will not shout. We will not threaten. We will simply end it. The hologram flickered once, then added quietly, You have one cycle to stand down. And with that, the image vanished. The cube disintegrated in a flash of blue light, not exploding, not burning, just dissolving into nothing. All that remained was the faint smell of ozone and the quiet sound of Elias Ward striking his lighter. The flame flickered as he brought the cigarette to his lips. He inhaled slowly, then exhaled a thin stream of smoke that drifted lazily toward the Chancellor. "Did you hear her, Vrax?" he asked softly. "One cycle. That's generous." The Chancellor's mandibles flared wide in rage. "How insolent, human," Ward finished for him, still calm. "Yeah, I know. You've said that word like it's an insult. But let me tell you something, Chancellor. It's not." He leaned forward slightly, his tone still quiet, but the weight behind it felt enormous. "You see, we come from a world where everything tries to kill you. The air burns, the oceans drown, the ground shakes, the sky freezes. We learned early that the universe doesn't care if you live or die, so we learned to care for ourselves." He paused, smoke curling from his lips. "We survived because we had to. We fought because no one else would fight for us. That's what it means to be human," the Chancellor hissed. "You think your primitive resilience means anything? You face extinction." Ward smiled faintly. "We've faced extinction before." "Never took." A few aliens actually flinched at that, not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was no bravado. No threat, just truth. The Chancellor raised his voice, desperate to regain control. "You cannot win. Our fleet span 1,000 systems. Our weapons already gone," Ward interrupted. The room fell dead silent. "What?" Vrax spat. Ward turned his wrist slightly, tapping the small metal device on his sleeve. The chamber's holoscreens flickered instantly, hijacked by Terran's signal. Static filled the room. Then images began to play. Zorath fleets drifting, powerless. Warships burning quietly in the void. Dozens of armadas saved as dark, silent dead. Ward didn't look at the screens. He didn't need to. He already knew what they showed. "You declared war," he said softly. "We responded." The Chancellor stared, horror replacing arrogance. This can't be real." Ward stood, buttoning his jacket. "Oh, it's real. You just didn't notice. Humans are good at being underestimated." He began to walk toward the exit. Each step echoed in the chamber, the sound sharp and deliberate. At the door he paused and looked back over his shoulder. "Tell your Empire." That was just the warning shot. Then he was gone. For a long moment no one in the council chamber moved. The hollow screen still showed the quiet wreckage of Zorath ships, massive, unstoppable fleets, now reduced to drifting ruins. The Chancellor's claws scraped against the table. "Find him. Find them!" he screamed. But deep inside even he knew it was already too late. The galaxy had just witnessed something it didn't understand. A war declared by arrogance, and answered by quiet, precise destruction. And somewhere out in the black, beyond the edge of known space, the Terran fleets moved again, silent, invisible. Relentless. The message was clear. Humanity was done talking. The Zorath Empire called it Operation Dawnfire. A full-scale offensive, swift, decisive, absolute. 50,000 warships, battleships, cruisers, carriers, dreadnoughts, all armed with weapons that could burn continents and vaporize moons. It was the largest fleet movement in 1,000 years. Their target, a small Terran colony world called New Geneva, on the edge of human space. To the Zorath, it was supposed to be simple. A show of strength, a single overwhelming strike to remind the galaxy who ruled the stars. The admirals promised victory within hours. By dawn, they said, the Terrans would kneel, but dawn never came. As the Zorath fleet crossed the final relay point near the Perseus Rift, sensors began to fail. Not all at once, just flickers, ghost readings, distorted signals. At first they assumed interference. Then entire navigation arrays went dark. Radar returned static. Communication lines crackled. The admiral of the fleet, High Commander Threx Vaughn, sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Emperor's Wrath, glaring at the flickering holograms. "Report," he demanded. "Unclear, Commander," his sensor officer said, tapping frantically at the controls. "There's interference everywhere. Power fluctuations across the fleet. From where?" The officer hesitated. "Unknown, sir." The Admiral's claws flexed. "Unknown is unacceptable. We are the Empire. Find the cause." The bridge crew obeyed, scrambling. But no matter what they tried, their scans showed nothing. No ships, no signals, no heat signatures, just empty space. And yet, every veteran on the bridge felt it. That heavy, unseen pressure pressing against the back of their minds. The feeling of being watched. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. The communication lines burst to life with static, then went silent again. A single message blinked on every console, text simple and cold. Acknowledged. Commencing engagement. The Admiral frowned. Who sent that? Before anyone could answer, every ship's AI core froze. Systems locked. Engines stalled. Scanned out in the void, the stars began to move. At first it looked like dust and tiny black specks shifting against the field of light. Then the specks grew larger, darker. Dozens of ships appeared out of nowhere, fading into visibility as if emerging from the void itself. No lights, no engine flares, just shadows, sliding through space like predators. They were human ships, but not like any design the Zorath had ever seen. Their hulls were angular, coated in a material that swallowed light. Their movements were smooth, silent, controlled, and when their weapons powered up, they didn't glow. They shimmered, soundless and invisible. On the Emperor's wrath, alarms screamed. Multiple contacts. Unknown class, no identification codes. How many? The officer swallowed. I can't count them, sir. They're everywhere. The Admiral rose to his feet. All ships fire at will. Wipe them from the stars. The Zorath Armada unleashed a storm. Thousands of energy blasts tore through the dark, lighting the void in brilliant flashes. But every shot hit nothing. The human ships had already moved, faster than scanners could track. They danced through the chaos. No one saw the Battle of New Geneva. There were no surviving witnesses. No signals escaped the dark zone where the Zorath fleet disappeared, and yet within a week, the entire galaxy knew. Stories spread faster than light. Whispers turned into reports. Reports became warnings, and warnings became fear. The official Zorath statement was brief and carefully worded. A communications mishap had caused temporary losses during routine maneuvers. But the galaxy wasn't stupid. Merchants, mercenaries, smugglers, they all heard the same thing from different corners of the void. The Empire's greatest fleet was gone. No debris. No escape pods. Not even a distress call. Just silence. The same kind of silence that followed humanity wherever it went. On the trade world of Velas 4, dock hands whispered to each other as they unloaded cargo. They say the humans didn't even use weapons. Just shut everything down. Nonsense. No one has that kind of power. Then where's the fleet, genius? In the slums of the Githari station, smugglers traded recordings. Fuzzy sensor data, half-corrupted, showing flashes of something. Dark shapes moving between bursts of light. Some swore they heard voices in the static. Human voices. And in the quiet corners of the Council's archives, analysts stared at the loss reports and trembled. Each fleet had been destroyed with surgical precision. No collateral damage, no stray fire. It was as if humanity knew exactly where to strike. One report marked classified level Omega summarized it in 3 words. They were waiting. At first, some laughed. The idea that humans, fragile, short-lived, impulsive humans, could annihilate a Zorath armada was absurd. But then, the second fleet vanished. And the third, and the fourth. No one laughed after that. The galaxy had seen powerful species before, empires that ruled through terror, species that consumed, enslaved, or burned entire worlds. But the humans were different. They didn't conquer. They didn't occupy. They simply erased the threat and disappeared again. They didn't demand tribute. They didn't send ultimatums. They didn't even celebrate victory. They just moved on, quiet, relentless, unstoppable. Soon, the whispers grew into something else, myths. Some said the humans had found ancient precursor technology, weapons beyond comprehension. Others believed they'd merged with AI, becoming half machine, half ghost. A few even claimed that humanity had made a deal with death itself, and that their soldiers no longer feared dying, because they had already done it once before. The stories varied, but one detail stayed the same in every telling: the cigarette. They said the human envoy, Elias Ward, was seen before every strike. Always calm, always silent, always smoking that strange burning stick from old Earth. On the Rim worlds, children began calling him the Smoker of Worlds. To the Zorath military, he became the Reaper in Black, And to the terrified minor empires caught between them, he was simply the warning. The Galactic Council tried to restore order. Meetings were held, resolutions passed, declarations written, all meaningless because no one wanted to fight the humans anymore. Not even the Zorath's allies. The Tyran Combine withdrew their fleets from the border. The Kel Dominions sealed their gates and declared neutrality. Even the Velen League, known for their greed, quietly cancelled every contract involving Terran assets. The Chancellor called them cowards. But deep down, even he began to sense what others had already accepted. The war was lost. It just hadn't ended yet. Meanwhile, across the stars, strange things began to happen. Zorath colonies near human space found their systems shut down. Communications, power, even life support, all offline. When rescue ships arrived, they found the inhabitants alive, but terrified. Each survivor told the same story. A voice on the radio, calm, human. It said only 3 words: go home, now. Then the power returned, and nothing else happened. No ships attacked, no one died. But every colony evacuated within days, not by command, but by instinct, because they all felt it. That same heavy silence before the storm. That same weight pressing against their minds, as if the humans were watching them, unseen, waiting. In the shadowed halls of the Zorath capital, the Supreme Chancellor met with his remaining generals. Their armor was polished, their words proud, but their eyes betrayed fear. "Tell me," the Chancellor hissed, "how does a young race do this? How do they strike us down and vanish before we can even aim?" No one answered. Then one old admiral, scarred and trembling, spoke quietly. "They fight like they've done this before, my lord. Not this war, all wars," the Chancellor glared. "Explain yourself." The admiral swallowed hard. "Every move they make, every strike they plan. It's not rage. It's not chaos. It's routine. They fight like people who've spent their whole history surviving extinction. Over and over again." Silence filled the room. "They don't think like conquerors," the admiral said softly. "They think like survivors." In the outer colonies, the smaller species began to carve new proverbs into their walls and monuments. Words once used as jokes, now spoken in reverence. Never corner a human. Don't mistake silence for peace. If you see the smoke, it's already too late. Even the criminal cartels, beings who respected nothing, began using Terran insignias as warning symbols. A skull within a circle, not to threaten others, but to say, "Do not come here." Human space became a void on every star map, a blank, unmarked region labeled only with a single word: restricted. And through it all, one man kept appearing, Elias Ward, the Envoy, the smoke. He would show up on distant stations, quiet and unannounced, speak to frightened ambassadors and then vanish again. Sometimes he offered peace, sometimes he gave warnings, but always, his words carried the same unshakable calm, as if everything happening was exactly as planned. And when one nervous diplomat finally asked him why humanity didn't stop, why they didn't end the war completely, Ward simply looked at him, eyes tired but steady, and said, "Because we don't destroy for pleasure. We destroy to remind them what happens when they forget who we are." He took one last drag of his cigarette, flicked it to the floor, and crushed it under his boot. And they're still forgetting. Across the stars, billions of beings shivered without knowing why. Because for the first time in galactic history, the most feared empire wasn't Zorath. It was humanity, and humanity hadn't even gotten serious yet. The Zorath Empire was dying, and it knew it. World by world, fleet by fleet, its grip on the galaxy slipped like sand through clawed hands. The once mighty banners of the Empire hung tattered above silent fortresses, and the proud Zorath legions, once the terror of the stars, now whispered the same name in fear: humanity. For months, the Chancellor had refused to believe it. He called the defeats temporary setbacks, the vanished fleets tactical withdrawals. But when the Terrans began striking at the Empire's heart worlds, shutting down power grids, hijacking communications, making entire cities vanish without a trace, even the Chancellor began to see the truth. This wasn't a war. It was an execution, slow, methodical, unstoppable. And so, in the deepest vault beneath the Zorath capital, he gave the order that no one had dared to speak aloud for 1,000 years. Activate Project Starbreaker. The Starbreaker was not a weapon, it was a curse. Forged long before the Zorath Empire rose to power, it was built during the first expansion wars, when ancient empires had tried to harness the heart of dying stars. Billions had perished in those experiments. Entire systems were torn apart. The Starbreaker was supposed to be sealed forever, hidden beneath the capital under pain of death. But desperate rulers do desperate things. In the command chamber, miles beneath the surface, engineers and scientists worked in terrified silence. The air was thick with radiation, sweat, and dread. At the center stood the Chancellor, watching as massive conduits pulsed with crimson light. "Is it ready?" he demanded. The chief engineer hesitated. "My lord, the Starbreaker was never meant to be used again. Its core is unstable. If we—" the Chancellor's eyes flared. "If we what, die?" "We are already dying." "Activate it!" The engineer swallowed hard. "Yes, my lord." A deep hum filled the chamber, low and unnatural, the kind of sound that made bones ache and teeth vibrate. The air itself seemed to twist, colors bending and folding as the energy core came alive. Somewhere above, the skies of the Zorath capital turned blood red. Across the galaxy, sensors screamed. Every ship, station, and relay, human or alien, detected the same anomaly. A gravitational spike of impossible magnitude. On Earth, deep within the Atlantic Command Complex, Elias Ward stood in front of a holographic display, watching the readings rise. "They actually did it," he said quietly. Beside him, Admiral Reyes frowned. "What is it?" Ward exhaled, smoke curling around his words. "Starbreaker. A planet killer. Old tech, ancient. It doesn't destroy ships and it erases space itself." Reyes's eyes widened. "Then we—" Ward raised a hand. "Already moving." "The fleet's in position." He turned toward the viewport. Beyond it, hundreds of Terran ships were assembling in high orbit, their hulls dark and silent. Not a single engine burned. Not a single weapon glowed. They simply floated there, waiting. On the Zorath capital, the Chancellor stared into the pulsing heart of the Starbreaker. "Target coordinates locked," a voice reported. "Human system." "So?" The Chancellor smiled for the first time in months. "Let them feel what fear." The war was over. Not with treaties, not with surrender, just silence. The Zorath Empire, the oldest, strongest civilization in the known galaxy, was gone. Their capital erased, their fleets dust, their colonies abandoned. No one cheered. No songs were sung. Because even victory felt small beside the sheer weight of what humanity had done. In the void where the Zorath homeworld had once glowed, there was now only a drifting field of particles, silent, shimmering dust orbiting a dead sun. Ships from across the galaxy came to see it. They didn't speak. They didn't record. They just watched. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was quiet. Trade routes reopened. Pirate bands dissolved. Even border skirmishes faded into memory. It wasn't peace born of hope. It was peace born of fear, because somewhere out there humanity was watching. On Earth, the blue planet spun calmly beneath the same old sun. Cities glowed again. Skies were clear. Children played under the same stars their ancestors had once feared. But deep below the surface, in the Atlantic Command Complex, humanity's leaders didn't celebrate. They gathered in silence around a circular table, faces grim. Admiral Reyes stood beside Elias Ward, her voice low. "They won't challenge us again," she said. "No," Ward replied. "They'll never need to. The lesson's permanent now." The Prime Counselor leaned forward. "And what about us, Elias? What happens when we become the thing they fear?" Ward didn't answer right away. He stared at the holographic map of the galaxy, countless stars, countless lives. Finally, he said quietly, "Then we remember. We remember why we fought. Not for conquest, not for pride, for survival." He took a slow drag of his cigarette. "And survival demands restraint." The council chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the truth. Humanity could rule the galaxy now if it wanted. No one could stop them, but humanity didn't move outward. They rebuilt instead, quietly, efficiently, without boasting. They restored colonies, repaired trade networks, even sent aid to neutral worlds that had once turned them away, and the galaxy noticed. On the border world of Yarith, an alien farmer found a Terran relief ship hovering above his village after a meteor strike. It didn't demand tribute. It didn't even announce itself. It just dropped supplies, left a beacon, and departed. The beacon contained a simple message in dozens of languages. "We don't want your worlds. We just want you to live." That message spread like wildfire. It crossed cultures, species, borders, until even the most distant colonies began whispering it like scripture. For the first time in ages, the galaxy didn't just fear humanity. It began to respect it. But the Zorath, their shadow remained. Across the stars, ruins drifted where their fleets had once stood. Broken war machines floated through the void. Silent monuments to arrogance, and amid that silence, rumors began again. Some claimed the Zorath weren't truly gone, that fragments of their AI had escaped into the dark between galaxies. Others said they had seen flickers of red light beyond the rim, the Starbreaker's echo, still searching for a target. No one knew for sure. But humanity was ready. Far beyond Sul, on a Terran deep space station orbiting a white dwarf, Elias Ward stood alone before a viewport. Outside, a massive construct hung in orbit, a ring of sleek black panels rotating slowly around the dying star. It was Project Aegis, humanity's new defense network, a wall of light stretching across the void. A young officer approached him. "Sir, the network's complete. Every sector is online. We're ready to deploy." Ward nodded slowly. "Good. Keep it quiet. No announcements," the officer frowned. "But shouldn't we tell the Council? Let the galaxy know we're—" Ward cut him off with a faint smile. "They already know. They just don't want to believe it." He turned back to the viewport, watching the white dwarf's faint glow flicker against the metal ring. "Let them think we're peaceful," he said softly. "Let them sleep easy. That's the point." Back on Earth, people began to dream again, not of war but of the stars. Exploration vessels set out once more, carrying scientists, artists, and children instead of soldiers. They planted new colonies, not fortresses. They built observatories, not weapons. Humanity had climbed out of the fire, and for once it chose not to burn the galaxy with it. Yet, in quiet corners of every starport, the stories still spread. Tales of the war, of the Envoy, of the Smirk. Every version was different, but they all ended the same way, with a human standing before the galaxy, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark, saying words no one would ever forget. "You really shouldn't have done that." Those words became a warning, a myth, a promise. Children of 100 races whispered it before going to sleep. Soldiers carved it onto their armor for luck. Merchants printed it on their hulls, half in fear, half in reverence, because everyone knew what it meant. It meant the humans remember. Years later, when historians tried to explain what truly happened, they called it the Silence War. They wrote about strategies, weapons, numbers, but they missed the truth. The truth was never about power. It was about resolve. About a species that had fought tooth and nail across millennia just to exist, and would never, ever let anyone take that away again. On the last night before his retirement, Elias Ward stood in the gardens of the Atlantic Command Complex. The air was cool, the ocean calm. He lit one final cigarette and watched the sunrise over a peaceful world. Admiral Reyes joined him, older now, quiet. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" she asked. Ward smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter if they do. What matters is they'll remember why they shouldn't try again." He took a slow drag, eyes reflecting the morning light. "Peace," he said, exhaling. "It's the only war worth winning." The sun rose higher, washing the sea in gold. Ward dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot, and walked away, leaving only the faint curl of smoke behind. The same smoke that once haunted a galaxy. And thus, humanity didn't conquer the stars. It earned them. Not through dominance, but through the one thing no empire could ever match: the will to survive, and the courage to stop when they finally could. 50 years had passed since the Silence War, 50 years since the day the Zorath Empire vanished. The galaxy had changed. New empires had risen, careful and cautious. Old wounds had healed, mostly. Trade thrived again, worlds rebuilt, and at the center of it all, Earth glowed like a blue jewel, untouched, unchallenged, and, according to rumor, watched by eyes that never slept. No one dared test humanity again. No one even thought about it, but peace, like gravity, always pulls at the cracks. On the edge of human space, near the Veil Nebula, a Terran survey ship called the Odyssey drifted through the dark. It wasn't a warship, just a research vessel with a crew of scientists and explorers. They were studying an anomaly, faint energy readings from beyond known space. Nothing dangerous, nothing unusual, until their instruments began to fail. First, the scanners froze. Then the nav systems blinked out. Then the stars themselves seemed to shift. The captain frowned. Navigation glitch? No, sir, the helmsman whispered. The stars moved, and then from the blackness something appeared, a shape. Massive, silent, drifting without light, without heat, without a trace of life. The ship's AI stuttered. Unknown contact detected. Configuration, it paused. Matches no known species. The crew stared through the viewport. It was a ship, yes, but ancient. Older than any empire. Its hull was smooth and seamless, its surface covered in strange patterns, like scars of a dead god. And across that surface, flickers of red light pulsed. Faint, rhythmic, deliberate. When the Odyssey's report reached Earth, it was sealed instantly. Only the highest command saw it. Deep beneath the Atlantic, in a chamber that hadn't been opened in decades, Elias Ward sat once more. Older now, slower, but his eyes still sharp. The Prime Counselor projected the data above the table, images of that vast, silent ship. "It's broadcasting something," she said. "We can't translate it." Ward studied the flickering symbols for a long time, then whispered, "I've seen this before." The others turned to him. "Where?" "On the Zorath capital," he said softly. Moments before it was erased, across the galaxy strange things began to happen. Long-dead Zorath outposts came online again, broadcasting static-laced distress signals. Fleets patrolling near the outer rim reported red flickers in deep space. Entire probe arrays went missing without a trace, and wherever it happened, only one message remained behind, short, simple, and chilling. "We remember." The Terran Strategic Council convened for the first time in 30 years. Admirals, scientists, and leaders gathered in tense silence. Admiral Reyes, grey-haired but still commanding, spoke first. "The Zorath are gone, we saw it." "We know it," Ward shook his head. "We erased their bodies, not their minds." A hush fell over the room. "You're saying they uploaded themselves?" Someone whispered. Ward nodded. "Before the end, they tried to use the Starbreaker to manipulate space itself. They learned to write code into the fabric of the void. To live between realities." The counselor leaned forward. "Then what do they want?" Ward met her eyes. "What all ghosts want? To be remembered." Within weeks, colonies across the rim began reporting power surges and communication blackouts. Entire data networks flickered with phantom signals. Sometimes, for a few seconds, the old Zorath emblem appeared, burning red against the void, and then vanished again. The people began calling it the Echo Plague.